The National Aeronautics and Space Administration presents Aeronautics and Space Report.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
It was the early 1960s, and President Kennedy had set the stage. Apollo 11, moon landing.
The 60s was an era of change. A change in power, civil rights, music, revolution, and transportation, namely in space travel. The space race was a fierce competition between the US and USSR, both nations trying to beat and outdo one another in space travel. The world tuned into their televisions, tracking the moves of both nations tentatively as they tried to launch a man to space. The race had been going on for around 13 years leading up to the moon landing. Before 1969, several strides had been made towards the improvement of space travel, including Russia sending the first dog and human into space, and the US pushed the limits in satellite technology and spacewalking. National media paid heavy attention to the race, and America's public was enamored in its events. The space race was a focal point of the 60s, and constantly played in the background of every American's life. In mid-20th century America, housewives played a similarly eminent role. They were the epitome of middle-class America and acted as the envy of the world. In 1956, Life magazine said to be an American woman today is to be cast in an exciting, challenging, and difficult role. Exciting because the sky seems to be the limit in education, work, and freedom.
The wives of astronauts belonging to these first space missions became instant celebrities. They smiled for newspapers and magazine covers and were looked up to as the pinnacle of femininity. They were members of an elite club and had access to jet-set galas and tea with the First Lady. Apollo 11 wives Joanne Aldrin and Janet Sharon gained special celebrity, since their husbands Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were the first men to ever set foot on the moon. The Apollo 11 mission launched on July 16, 1969, and carried out John F. Kennedy's original objective of sending a man to the moon before the end of the decade. Aldrin and Armstrong made it to the moon on July 20, 1969, and nearly 500 million people were watching the televised broadcast. Meanwhile at home, the wives kept the household and cared for the children. An instant bond between the wives was formed, seeing as they were the first in American history to go through the experience of having their husbands sent to the moon. Joanne Aldrin told The Times, "I had married an engineer, and here he was a hero. This was disturbing, but I didn't understand, and my immediate reaction was anger towards Buzz. I did realize I should have expected it. The wives' husbands being sent to space automatically pushed them into the spotlight. TV crews and cameras would camp outside their house, waiting for a reaction from the families whose husbands were on a mission. At home, window blinds would have to be taped together to allow privacy from America's pressuring gaze. Aldrin found comfort within her Houston circle of astronaut wives and in a theater group she joined. Although the life of an astronaut's wife appeared very glamorous on TV, Aldrin experienced something completely different. Behind closed doors, Aldrin said, "There's something about the public life making a hero of a man. What it did to me and the kids. Maybe these things have been behind closed doors for too long. They're not unusual, it's only unusual that we're talking about them." The wives continued to face challenges and remained in the limelight post-Apollo 11. Both the NASA astronauts and their families continued to do interviews and write books. The astronauts talking about their experiences in space, and the wives talking about their constant fear of space disaster as they watched the missions unfold from their living room couch.
This has been an Aeronautics and Space Report presented by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.